Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, and I am really looking forward to this show because this one's we're going to be talking different football perspectives. We have Zach Hirsch, our resident sports handicapper, and we have David Levin, our resident beat writer. And guys, welcome on the broadcast.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Glad to be back.
Great to be here, Scott.
All right. Well,
How you doing, Zach? You doing well?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm looking forward to seeing Zach school you, David, on some handicapping. So, fire away, David. What do you want to ask Boy Wonder?
Boy Wonder. Actually, that was what I was going to use. Zach, and just going over a few things. I know that you're 18 years old. You're a senior in high school, and you're getting ready to go off to college. First of all, I got to ask, when I was 18, I was trying to figure out, what I was going to do for the senior prom, and I was wondering whether I was going to buy a car and what college I was going to. How do you get into sports handicapping?
So I've been a huge sports fan my whole life since I was very young. I've always loved football, basketball, boxing, MMA. And the picking wins part came naturally to me. I've always analyzed the matchups. I've always studied the stats. And then the picking wins has always been something I've done. Me and my family actually used to do a football pool. We call it our NFL picks. Me, my mom, my older brother, and my dad. I was about 7 years old, and I would win most of the time. And then when I was about 12 years old, my dad entered a sports picking pool for an NFL week. And I filled it out, and about 100 people entered, and each person put in, I think, $10, something like that. And I actually had a perfect week. That was my first time ever picking a full slate of games. And my dad forgot about it, and he figured, of course, we didn't win because so many people entered. And he came in to get a smoothie, and they said, "Are you Zach?" He goes, "No, I'm not Zach. That's my son." He goes, "Oh, he won the sports picking thing. Here's your $500.
Nice.
And from there, we knew I had a talent, and I started I Pick Wins this July. This past July.
That's like I said, that's actually really impressive. Let me ask you this, because this isn't something that I would consider, this isn't the normal situation here. Usually when you're talking about handicapping and you're betting and you're gambling, because that's all that's involved in this, you're thinking about the middle-aged guy with a cigar that he's smoking and he's sitting in a parlor room or something like that in Vegas taking money. How is it different for you? You're young, you're 18, so you're not even old enough to drink yet. So what makes what you do a little bit different than, say, somebody my age, and I'm close to 50?
I think the big difference is, well, first of all, I don't bet, so I think that's a huge advantage. I think when you get your own personal money involved, that's where it goes downhill. Of course, you're going to have a vested interest. You're not going to be at your absolute best. And I follow the trends. I follow the analytics. I follow the stats. And I do the best to innovate. And really, I do money line picks. So I don't pick the spread. I've seen people get burned way too many times over the years on very late covers and things like that. So I've been sticking to money lines. And I think my biggest advantage is the fact that I'm so diverse. I can pick a combat sport. I can pick football. I went to 21-0 in college football. So I think my biggest advantage as a sports handicapper is having knowledge of multiple sports across multiple different areas.
Great. Which one do you like the most?
My first love is football. Football is my thing. College football, NFL, both.
What team do you follow the most in the NFL?
I follow every team. I can probably name every starter for every team, but my favorite team growing up always Dallas Cowboys.
Okay. Any affinity for the teams here in the state of Florida?
As far as the Florida teams, no. I went to a Cowboys-Dolphins game in 2014, but other than that, not too much, I've always been a Cowboys fan my whole life. I love the Miami Hurricanes. Both my grandparents went there, and my grandma had season tickets for a while and things like that. And, of course, I did an internship with FAU football last summer, so I root for them. And, Florida obviously has a lot of professional sports teams.
Of course. Okay, let's say I'm a beginner. I don't gamble that much. I mean, parlor, tools, and I've done the parlor cards in the past. there'll be, March Madness or things like that. And every once in a while, I'll get into a pool with picking winners like you did with the NFL. If I'm just a beginner and I'm just, looking at a list of teams and I want to know how I should begin, what's the best advice you're going to give me?
The best advice I can give you is not to listen to anybody else. Do your own research. Don't necessarily let a trendy team or a trendy player affect what you're going to pick. You see a lot of times where a line shifts rapidly and a team becomes an underdog that probably shouldn't be an underdog. They're a proven, established team. And I think you have to do your own deep dive into the stats. And, of course, I watch the film. I watch every football game every Sunday. I watch a ton of college football. And a lot of it is eye test. A lot of it is analytics. I wouldn't recommend gambling at all, but if you are, you have to be very proficient in being able to analyze and really digest the stats and analytics of it all.
All right, take away the money factor. I'm assuming this is a thrill for you. It's a natural high, being able to pick winners and getting it right. Is it more strategic? Is it more mathematical? Is it more analytical? What is the defining, part of it that helps you the most?
I think it's an analytical approach. And that's how I call myself, a sports analyst and a sports handicapper. And I have my own advanced stats, too, that I've come up with. I think my ability to see the game of football, mixed martial arts, boxing is a big one for me. And it's something that, it takes time, and I've been watching sports my whole life. I have a very, very big passion for it. I have a huge interest in it, and I think that definitely helps with the picking. If I didn't have a passion for sports, I wouldn't be nearly as good at sports handicapping, of course. It all has to be natural to you.
Great. Well, let me ask you this as well. Scott and I are a little bit older, obviously. But when we were growing up, boxing was a big deal. They'd have, boxing matches on Saturday afternoon, and these weren't just like, no names that you knew. These were, super welterweights and heavyweights, and we'd watch boxing at night and whatnot. But then again, boxing is a subjective sport where you're counting on 3 judges to get it right, and scorecards, as you know, can be skewed. How do you overcome that? Because, just to be honest with you, there have been times when we've wondered whether the cards were, for the take or what, because of the way they were scoring particular matches, the boxing matches.
You're 100% right. That's a huge thing in boxing. I was a victim of this earlier this year. I picked Badu Jack in a fight, and on the Mayweather card promotion in Atlanta, and he had a big fight against Jean Pascal. And in my opinion, Badu Jack easily won this fight. He really came on strong in the second half of the fight. He was able to knock him down. But Badu Jack has a history of really getting screwed on judges' scorecards. And in this fight, he landed more punches, he landed more significant strikes. I thought he won more rounds. And Pascal ended up getting the decision. That's the risk of taking boxing, and it's really unfortunate. It's a lot of times, you see corruption in plain sight. It's a very common thing, and it's sad to see, but it's an unfortunate reality. And I'll do my best to pick, who I think the better boxer is.
Okay. What about MMA a little bit? I know that, and I'm a big fan of MMA. I like it because it's pure sport. It is. I mean, you have a definitive winner and a definitive loser. When you watch MMA, they do go to the judges' scorecards, but you see guys and gals, for that matter, getting the tar beaten out of each other. And when you're assessing who to pick, do you go back and look at past matches? Do you see trends in who they're fighting? Take Brock Lesnar, for example, because he does really well against people like Shane Carwin and other bigger fighters. But when he was facing smaller fighters that were quicker and maybe a little more elusive, he was getting his butt handed to him. Do you pick up on those trends as well?
It's funny you say that, because Brock Lesnar versus Shane Carwin was the first MMA match I remember watching. And I was a big fan of Brock from the WWE as a little kid.
Right.
And after that fight, I fell in love with the UFC and MMA in general. But, it's a huge factor. I think the biggest factor is stylistic matchups. MMA is a sport where styles really make fights. You can have a guy who's ranked number 15 be the toughest challenge for the title holder. You'll say, what? How could the guy who's number 15 be better than the guy who's number 1? Well, no, he'd lose to number 1, but he can beat the champion because he's good at this and this guy's good at that. He can counter with that. And it's very fascinating to see how the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gets involved, how the wrestling gets involved, how the Muay Thai gets involved, how the kickboxing gets involved. This guy's a better boxer. This guy's a better this. This guy's stronger. This guy's faster. And it's kind of like a puzzle to me to be able to figure out how this guy deals with each specific style. I think it's a sport you have to look at past fights. You have to see how this. If I'm Conor McGregor and I'm trying to analyze a fight that Conor McGregor is in, of course, and he's fighting a traditional Muay Thai fighter, right? How am I going to be able to know how he fares against the style unless I go back to his old fights and I find what fights he had against that particular style, how he deals with certain pressure, how he deals with counter punchers, how he deals with this, how he deals with that. And I think it's a fascinating sport to analyze, and it's one you really have to understand fully in depth. It's one that you have to watch for a very long time before you really get to understand and be able to pick the matchups, because a lot of times you look at the TV and the guy who looks more physically imposing, the guy who has a better record, doesn't always win.
Who do you like watching the most in MMA? I tend to like to watch. I know that the George St. Pierre, BJ Penn matches were classics. I know that Matt Hughes, used to put on a show. I tend to watch those type of guys who are more athletic, smaller type of performers than watch the real heavyweights because they tend to slow down quicker. What interests you the most about the sport?
I like all styles. It sounds cliche, but I can watch any fight. I watch every card pretty much. But my favorite fighters right now are Conor McGregor, Israel Adesanya. I know his last fight was boring, but before that he was on a kill streak.
Yes, it was very boring. Right.
I used to love watching John Jones fight up through his title reign, and when he was killing all the old light heavyweights like Shogun and Hendo and Rashad Evans and Rampage. I thought he was amazing to see when he had his real athleticism. I've always liked Daniel Cormier. Tony Ferguson's one of my favorite fighters. He never stops coming forward. And I think MMA is a fascinating sport, And it's funny, it's still a traditional sport in some ways. Some guys only have one style. But at the very top, you see they have everything in spades. They're a black belt. They're great wrestlers. They've got great striking, And it's great. It's crazy to see how much the sport's evolved.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question about you yourself. You're 18 years old, and you walk up to anybody on the street. You're talking to them about life in general, and you say, "Well, this is what I do. I handicap sports, or I'm an analyst, or I do these things." And people look at you and go, "Really?" Do you tend to think that are people taking you more seriously now, or are you still fighting that stigma of, "Gee, you're still in high school, and maybe this is a passing fancy"?
I think everyone that follows my picks definitely takes it seriously. In the beginning, I got a lot of comments saying I'm 12 years old, my voice is so high and whatever. But,
right.
It happens. It's the internet. But I think people saw how accurate I was, especially when I went 21-0 in college football picks. And I picked the Super Bowl. It's just, I think I proved myself. And, you just got to take people at, who they are. I don't know. It's kind of a crazy thing. What does age have to do with sports handicapping?
Well, I know, but I'm speaking, I guess, from maybe somebody's point of view that won't, off the street, oh, he does this. And
100%.
Right. Scott and I know that it's something that you're passionate about. Scott and I understand this is something that you can make a living at. And everybody has their own opinion. When I was your age, I was watching Mel Kiper doing the NFL draft, and he would, I would buy the book and I would beat the stats and I'd follow, you couldn't get tape back then. It's 30-something years ago. So you just listened to what everybody said, you read a little bit, and you hoped you got it right. You have an advantage to people our age where you have technology that helps you out, which makes it very fortunate for you. Do you follow what people say about the NFL draft or the NBA draft or baseball or whatever? Do you really listen to the experts and then just formulate your own opinion, or do you really take to heart, this is what Peter Gammon said, or, Hyper says this, or, Kenny Smith with the NBA? I mean, how much does that play into what you follow as well?
I will say, as far as far as picking games, what people says has pretty much absolutely no effect on me.
Okay.
Whatever their opinion doesn't sway me unless it's like an injury update. But as far as the NFL draft, yeah, I've taken a lot of feedback. I think scouting and things like that are something you have to get second opinions on. You have to look at the experts. You have to look at the people you trust. It's impossible to evaluate 250 prospects as me. I go to school, and I'm trying to study my picks. I don't really have time to study 200 hours of film every week. But as far as the handicapping goes, I don't think you can really take in what other people say and use that for your picks. I think that would be not the best strategy. But as far as something like the NFL draft, the NBA draft, NFL offseason, things like that, I think, it's great to listen to other experts and to find who you trust the most and keep tabs on who's the most correct over time.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the NFL draft because that's a week away. And Scott and I are both very excited about this. Finally, we're moving on to the draft. And let's take your Dallas Cowboys, for instance. We know that they have a quarterback who just got paid handsomely. They need a wide receiver. They need a little bit of help on the defensive line. When you're assessing and deciding maybe what areas of the Cowboys or any other team, what they should be looking at, how do you decipher what comes first?
Man, I think as far as you have to look at their history and who their general manager has targeted. A lot of guys have specific quotas they like to hit on things like arm length, height, weight. You'll see a certain DB coach loves to pick cornerbacks that are at least 6'2" and they have at least 34-inch arms. And you'll see in other guys that their defensive ends have to be long, they have to be bendy. And as far as the Dallas Cowboys go, they've had a lot of shocking picks the last couple of years, but they're a team that's not too shy. And their big board has literally gotten leaked like multiple times where people can just take a picture of it. And you see on social media, they're posting their draft interviews and stuff. So I'm very excited for the NFL draft. This is one of my favorite times of the year. And every year there's always surprises that absolutely nobody saw coming.
Especially with Dallas for some reason. Sorry about the Jacksonville. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars for a minute, who are perennial bottom feeders. With a team like that, what kind of things do you look at? Because they have not had successful drafts. They have not been as poignant with the players they have selected over the last few years. Granted, last year was really good. What do you look at with their trends, maybe so that maybe they do something a little bit different than they would normally do?
Well, their drafting hasn't been very smart. I mean, they selected Leonard Fournette at number 4. I personally didn't have him as anywhere near the top running backs in that class. I thought Dalvin Cook was a lot better. I thought Christian McCaffrey was a lot better. I thought Joe Mixon was a lot better. And if you're not going to draft correctly, if you're not going to draft the real positions of value, then what are you doing? I think this year the wise thing to do would be to either take a position of value like cornerback, maybe quarterback. We'll see how much they really like Gardner Minshew. I'm not too sure. And or trade down, acquire more assets. I think they're in a complete tear-down mode. They seem to be rebuilding. They traded Jalen Ramsey, A.J. Boyd, Calais Campbell, Ngakoue seems to be on the trade block. So I think they should retool, trade down, and try to acquire as many assets and fill as many starting jobs as they can, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Okay, if I tell you that today, in an interview, Doug Marrone said, I'm excited about the fact that Gardner Minshew is going to be our quarterback this year. We want to see him get better, and we want to build around him. What does that do to change your draft strategy?
Well, I mean, that's a great start. If you're confident in your quarterback, that's a huge weight lifted off your shoulder. That's the most important position on the field by far. And I think having a franchise quarterback is the first step. And if you're a head coach and you're confident in your starting quarterback, I think that's fantastic. Then I think you should definitely do your best to build around him. Get your franchise left tackle. Make sure he has a solid number 1 receiver. He has DJ Shark. I think Leonard Fournette is on his way out, if not this year, next year. And I think they're going to retool. Minshew seems to be their guy right now, but next year, obviously, everything can change. We saw with Nick Foles how quickly he was out of there. And the Jaguars just seem to be habitual losers. I don't, their drafting just hasn't been up to par. Their offseason moves are a bit puzzling. But hopefully they turn it around this draft some good players.
how much different is it for you to look at the NFL draft and analyze that, because it's a different beast as opposed to picking winners with football games or MMA or whatever. What is your mind? How do you? I guess you have to have a different mindset for both. You know, when you're doing one versus the other, how easily adaptable are you for that?
Extremely. As far as anything and football related, I pretty much follow it all. I think I'd be a pretty good general manager. I follow the draft. I'm always trying to figure out, how to build the best possible team and what positions, what you can draft and how that affects the team. I think that definitely has to go into sports handicapping, because of the best drafted teams, the teams that are drafting good players at valuable positions, end up doing really well. You see the teams that get it and some of the teams that don't. I think eventually all 32 teams will get it. They will understand how the draft works, how to build your team, how the salary cap works. But some teams, they're still living in the Stone Age, it seems like to me. But, and that definitely has something to do with the way I'm evaluating their draft. A lot of teams have an old mindset. You see the Giants general manager, Dave Gettleman, he gets a lot of flack for it. He's the guy who drafted Saquon Barkley at number 2 overall when they could have had their franchise quarterback, Sam Darnold. He takes big run-stuffing defensive tackles when analytics show maybe that's not the best use of draft resources at this point. And I will see next year how each team does, how the teams that draft by positions of value do, how the teams that are drafting running backs high and giving them big contracts do, and all types of things. Unless you're a Christian McCaffrey or an Ezekiel Elliott, I don't really see the point in giving a running back over $14 million a year at this point. Unless you're playing all 16 games and you're putting in over 2,000 yards. But we see every year a team will take a running back with a third-round pick and they'll have like 1,500 yards the first year. You're like, where did this guy come from? It's every year.
What's the one team what's the one team last year that surprised you the most with the NFL draft based on what research you did?
Man, last year, let me refresh my memory. The 2019 NFL draft. Wow, every year there's surprises. My surprise was definitely when the Raiders selected Cleveland Ferrell at number 4. I couldn't believe my eyes. He was the guy who I think was being mocked at like 15 or so. The Raiders kept it pretty close to their vest. Mike Mayock was a brand new GM, so we didn't really know what type of draft strategy he would have. And that was definitely a shock pick. And I could not believe that pick at all. I did not think that guy was going to go at number 4.
Well, I'll tell you what about number 4. When the Raiders picked Cleveland, there was this little cheer in the room. Scott and I were there in Jacksonville. And then at number 6, when the Giants gave us a gift and they took Daniel Jones, everybody got really excited because, oh boy, Josh Allen was on the board. The Jaguars, in 30 seconds, had the card up to the podium. What do you think about Josh Allen and the way he played last year? Obviously, he was a surprise at number 7 because they would have to fall for him. How did you handicap him?
I thought he was the number 2 pass rusher in the draft last year behind Nick Bosa. He's extremely athletic. I think he can easily even play a coverage linebacker role. He's a very solid pass rusher, and I think he'll be a cornerstone for that franchise for a long time. I thought it was a great pick.
It's very cool. Who do you think the Jaguars are going to take at 9?
If I had to guess right now, I think I'm leaning towards C.J. Henderson for them. 1, he's a Florida guy. He went to Gainesville. He went to the University of Florida, obviously pretty close to Jacksonville. Number 2, they have a huge need at cornerback. They lost A.J. Boye. They traded him. They traded Jalen Ramsey. They used to have probably the best cornerback duo in the NFL. Now their corners are kind of a wasteland. And number 3, he's a really good player who might be the best player available at that time.
So you're predicting that somebody like a Derek Brown is not going to be available at 9, or is Henderson ranked higher on your board than a Derek Brown or a Javon Kinlaw or somebody like that on the interior defensive line?
As far as my board, I would definitely prefer to draft a cornerback. An offensive tackle, just especially a run-stuffing defensive tackle, just a much more valuable position. And if you look at the analytics, look at the stats, cornerbacks at more wins, they add more value than a defensive tackle usually. But Javon Kinlaw, I've heard he has some knee issues, and but I can't see the medicals. I can't see the medicals that the Jaguars do. C.J. Henderson could have an arthritic hip, and I have no idea. But the guy's 6'1". He ran a 4.3 something, I believe, or a low 4.4. He's got a traditional build, and he did some really special stuff at Florida.
Who's going to be the surprise of this first round, do you think? Who's going to stick out that people are going to say, wow, we didn't have him ranked that high?
Man, I will say this draft, I think I see less surprises. Because if you think about it, teams are going to really have to go off a big board. They're not going to be able to be enamored by guys coming in on visits. There have been no visits. You're going off the Combine, Senior Bowl, and I guess your discussions at those events and your Zoom calls. But I think the draft's going to have less surprises, and you're going to be able to stick to more of a traditional board. I think the biggest surprises usually come with the quarterback position. Someone like Jordan Love could go way higher than anyone expects, or he could go way lower. It's a very volatile position. And it seems to me that not many teams really need quarterbacks. You have guys like Jameis Winston who are going to be backups next year. You saw Ryan Tannehill was a backup last year. Andy Dalton probably isn't going to have a starting job. So I wouldn't be surprised if some quarterbacks fall further than we think, because they're really – a lot of teams have their starting quarterback, it seems like to me. And I also wouldn't be surprised if no running backs go in the first round. That's not usually a thing. I think with the added fact that teams are only that running backs aren't too valuable and the running back class isn't too good. And the other thing that I think would surprise a lot of people is the amount of wide receivers that are going to go in the first two rounds. I wrote about this earlier today. I'm going to submit the article soon for the South Florida Tribune, but there are 13 wide receivers who could go in the first two rounds. That's a lot of wide receivers. It's a great wide receiver class, and it's probably one of the best in NFL history at this point.
What do you think? Sorry. Asthma. What is the position in the draft that you think is probably the weakest?
And that's a good question. I go on interior offensive line. There just isn't much there. There's no one that I think is really going to go in the first round. Maybe one's going to go at the very end of the first round. But just very weak center, left guard, right guard. There's just not too much there at this point. Not a lot of depth. Nothing really at the high end. A lot weaker than the past classes. We saw Quentin Nelson go in the top 10, a little bit ago. We've had great guards in the past, but this year they're just not there.
Okay, yeah, I did a mock draft with Sam Saturday, which I work for. With the 9th pick, because I got to draft those first round players for Jacksonville. With the 9th pick, I took Mekhi Becton from Louisville. I felt that the Jaguars should try and get somebody on either the offensive or defensive line. I thought that he ranked higher than Kinlaw, but I also thought Derek Brown would be gone at least no later than Arizona at 8. So I went ahead and took the offensive lineman first. And then with the 20th pick, I took C.J. Henderson, much like you would have at 9, thinking that 4 offensive linemen and 4 quarterbacks would go in the top 15 picks.
I will say this. As of right now, Mystic Zach predicts that Henderson does not make it to 20. I just think teams will view him as the clear number 2 guy. He's just too athletic and too tall. That's a rare thing, especially in the modern NFL.
He's there by 18. I do believe that he's there at 18 with the Raiders. They will take him for sure if he's still there. I also see he could possibly be off the board with San Francisco.
I think Dallas definitely takes him.
You think so? And that's a possibility.
100%.
Very, very, and I agree. It's not it's not out of the realm of possibility that they would do that. And what would be the shocking pick? I know that we have mixed opinions, but we both are not. Scott and I are not sold on Tua. We think there's just too many variables. That there's injury concerns. I don't think he's going to be that great on the pro level, and I'm a rarity. I think that he is a system quarterback. What are your take on Tua?
I'm a Tua guy.
Oh, gosh, okay.
I'm a big fan of Tua, but of course I can't see his injury history. I don't have access to his medicals.
Well,
I'm not sure how his tip is, but as far as taking away the injury variable, I think a healthy Tua is a great NFL quarterback.
So then with that said, Zach, where do you think he winds up?
Miami or the Chargers?
Okay. All right, I'm going to ask
So he doesn't get past 6. Okay.
All right, let me add a couple questions to this conversation. First of all, okay, many years ago I covered the NFL draft for the Detroit Lions, and I can tell you right now, guys, okay, I had stacks of press releases, and my briefcases were so filled with stuff, I would hang out at the Lions headquarters for the better part of 12 to 14 hours a day at the Pontiac Silverdome. Thankfully, I only lived a half an hour away, and I had a quick turnaround, and they used to do a great job keeping us fed. I tell you, I would talk to assistant coaches. I would talk to Wayne Fonts, and I was there for one draft when the Lions had traded away their first-round pick to the New Orleans Saints to get Pat Swilling, and Wayne Fonts was smoking his cigar. Well, how did that turn out? Yes, Pat Swilling was the intimidating pass rusher they wanted. Who did they end up picking? Willie Roaf. Where did he wind up? Canton, Ohio. Need I say a whole lot more? But back then, okay, the Lions did a great job keeping us writers and media fed. Oh, my goodness. If I told you what they ate, they'd make a cruise ship look like nothing with the buffet. It was that good. So just thought I'd throw that.
So you're saying it's better than last year, huh?
Well, I was getting to last year, okay? Last year in Jacksonville was my first draft in quite a while, and there was no paper trail there. I had to get used to this electronic stuff. But, yeah, a little bit of stuff, but it wasn't that, and the food was different. Nothing against the Jaguars. It just meant that the draft had changed in 20-some-odd years. All right, I'm going to add a couple of other questions, and you guys continue, all right? But I had to get my draft story about the Lions, about the stacks of press releases, the great food, and last year's comparison, meaning no paper trail. All right, so you said that Tua, you think, is going to wind up with the Miami Dolphins or the Chargers. If you had to venture a guess between one or the other, which one would you actually put him in, Zach?
I'm going to go Miami. They've been rumored to have a lot of interest for a long time now. But, nothing's set in stone.
Well, nothing's, of course, set in stone, except the fact that I'm putting you on the spot, okay? Now, one of the most heralded running backs out there is Jonathan Taylor out of the University of Wisconsin. Do you have any idea where you think Jonathan Taylor could wind?
I think he'll go late first, early second. I think it'd be really interesting if a team like the Chiefs got him. They haven't had a really good running back in a long time, and their offense is obviously incredible. But Jonathan Taylor, I think will scare off some teams. He's just gotten so many carries at Wisconsin running back. Running backs have a certain amount of carries they can take before, they eventually give out and aren't as explosive anymore. And Wisconsin is a team that really gives their running backs a lot of carries. We saw it with Melvin Gordon. We saw it. They gave James White a lot of touches. Monty Ball. They're a team that's had a lot of great running backs, a lot of great offensive linemen, but they give the running backs a lot of carries.
Now, in January, I saw Jerry Jeudy and I saw Ruggs play against the Wolverines. Didn't really quite like the outcome since I'm a Wolverines guy. But where do you see both of those two wideouts going, since you indicated there were, 13 wide receivers, so it's a deep draft? And then when you're done answering that question, the Houston Texans went ahead and shipped out DeAndre Hopkins to the Arizona Cardinals. Do you see the Houston Texans snapping up a wideout?
As far as Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs, I heard the Denver Broncos have a huge interest in Henry Ruggs, that they want to pair him with Courtland Sutton, that they're even willing to trade up maybe. So they picked number 15. And Jerry Jeudy could go number 12 to the Oakland Raiders. He could go number 9 to the Jets. I believe the Jets are the number 9 pick. Those are two teams that definitely need a wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb's an amazing wide receiver. I think Jeudy, Ruggs, and Lamb are the clear top 3 wide receivers. And I think in any other class, they would be the perennial number 1 receiver. It's a very good class.
Could you see Jeudy winding up with the Jaguars?
That could totally be a possibility. I think he'd be a great weapon for Gardner Minshew. I think if he's their franchise quarterback and they really believe that, the first step would be to help him out and get him a real number 1 receiver, a great player, in Jerry Jeudy.
Well, he's an SEC guy.
I got to interject for a minute, please. So, because I'm one of the few people that believe the Jaguars wide receiver group is better than most think. I think that a lot of the problems that existed with the wide receivers in the passing game had to do with the fact that the offense was once designed for Nick Foles, and there was a bunch of adjustment. and John DeFilippo wasn't able to make the adjustments on game day that helped the other wide receivers in the passing attack be as effective. So you don't think that collectively the wide receivers are good enough, or you just think somebody has to complement DJ Chark?
I think Judy's that good. I think he transcends whatever team really has a receiver. So I think in most NFL teams, he's pretty much going to cement himself as number one receiver within year two. He's just such a good route runner. He's so explosive. And I think, in my opinion, he's the best receiver to come out of college since Amari Cooper did in 2015.
Well, it's not like there isn't any familiarity since he's a Southeastern Conference guy. So with that said, okay, what are your thoughts about Jay Gruden as the offensive coordinator for Jacksonville?
I like Jay Gruden as an offensive coordinator. I thought he got a little bit of a bad rap. I don't think he got enough credit for his play calling. He had some real creative play calling. He was able to really get his playmakers involved there. We saw a whole litany of guys like Deshaun Jackson, Adrian Peterson at the end. He's a guy who can really get playmakers involved. He can do some real creative stuff, just like his brother John. I think that's a good hire.
Yeah, and bear in mind, I don't count Jay Gruden's failure in Washington to be anything because everybody fails there. I more look at his work with the Cincinnati Bengals. So that's how I would identify Jay Gruden. David, take over, and then I'll mention something toward the end. Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, this is great conversation. And, Scott and I get a chance to talk about it, every week about it leading up to the draft, but actually being able to talk with somebody else who follows it, who studies it, who makes it a religion, if you will. This is really good stuff. If the draft goes down the way it should, and I think it's going to be kind of a potluck of what you see, because I'm not sure how they're breaking down all the technology. Is this also going to be a draft that's going to remember to be, we goofed it because we didn't have enough time or we didn't have enough resources to actually get in, see, touch, smell, taste, come in contact with these draft picks?
I like it. I think a lot of times people become too enamored with a player because of how they interviewed in person. I think this is a real way you can look at the tape and just go off of that. What are they doing in the game? How are they performing against top-level competition? I think this is a way to simplify it, and I think it'll help a lot of teams that often overthink it.
Okay, Zach, a question came to mind. What do you think about Shea Patterson, the former Michigan Wolverines quarterback? He actually, to me, improved with the 2 years with Jim Harbaugh. And, we know Michigan quarterbacks don't do that badly. And if I need to go ahead and remind anybody, Tom Brady was one of them. But let's talk about Shea Patterson as a separate entity.
Shea Patterson, I think Harbaugh provides an incredibly quarterback-friendly scheme. The guy's a quarterback guru. We've seen him do great things with quarterbacks in the past. And I just was not impressed with anything I saw from him. He had high hopes coming out of Ole Miss, I believe, a transfer. Right. And he's got some mobility. He can leave the pocket, but he's a first-rate quarterback who really doesn't have great arm strength. I think he'll be a late-round pick. But when he was transferring from Ole Miss, he was looked at as a Heisman guy who could be a top pick potentially.
Right.
And he just disappointed me in his tenure with Michigan.
No problem. Okay. Obviously, I didn't think he was going to be a high-round pick, but you never know. Once he's in the pros and he has a much better coaching and that he'd have. I remember years ago when Matt Castle never even got on the field for USC, and Matt Castle carved himself a niche in the NFL for quite a while. So, just because they don't perform up to standards in college doesn't mean you put them in the right system, let alone coach, and that they can't perform well in the pros. So go ahead, David.
Okay, last question from me. The New England Patriots lost Tom Brady. So is this a case where the Patriots are going to be good because Belichick is that great a coach? Are they going to fall and plummet because Brady was the whole operation?
A little bit of both. We saw Belichick go 11-5 with Matt Castle. Scott just mentioned the Matt Castle. And but Belichick's obviously, in my opinion, the greatest coach in NFL history. I see them trying to retool, rebuild. They also lost a lot of guys in free agency aside from Tom Brady. We saw Jamie Collins leave, Kyle Van Noy leave. I think Julian Edelman might be a guy they potentially chip out. That wouldn't surprise me. And in my opinion, I think they should really try to tank this next year and try to get a Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields in the next draft. I think their absolute ceiling with a guy like Jarrett Stidham at quarterback is 9 wins. maybe 10 if their special teams is really that good as it usually is. And Belichick, absolute best, especially with the defensive game plans and the special teams game plans. He's always 2 steps ahead of the opponent. And I think he can do some amazing things, but I don't think that team's going to be a legitimate contender with Jarrett Stidham at quarterback.
All right, now Caesar says that the over-under that the Bucks should get 9 wins, and they've got the Patriots at 8.5. How many? Where do you see both those two teams playing out? Obviously, we have to look at the draft, but if you had to look at on this very date, who gets more wins, the Buccaneers or the Patriots, and how many?
I think the Buccaneers.
Okay.
I think they can easily win the NFC South, and I'm thinking about 10 to 11 wins as of right now before the draft, because I really love their offense. Tom Brady, I think, got a lot of flack, but his receivers really weren't separating deep. We saw they released Josh Gordon, and he just didn't have much help. N'Keal Harry wasn't separating at all. They were having 7th-round picks sub in and start like Jacoby Myers, and I think in Tampa Bay it's an amazing fit. I thought his deep ball was very underrated last year. I thought he still had a pretty good arm strength, not quite what it was in his prime, not quite 2007 Brady arm strength, but he still throws a very accurate deep ball, and I think he'll have a great rapport with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. I saw they're trying to trade O.J. Howard. I think that would be a mistake. I think that's a guy with a lot of potential. And I think in the NFL draft, they're going to target a real good running back. They've already got Ronald Jones. And I think Tom Brady will lead that team to a winning record for sure.
Does Antonio Brown ever make his way back in the NFL? Do you think there's another team that would take a chance on him?
God, I was really hoping the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would. I thought it made a lot of sense. Obviously, Brown living in Florida and him and Tom Brady being so close and them needing a third receiver. Can you imagine Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, and Tom Brady? That would be really special. And I see Antonio Brown making his way back in the NFL. I just think he has so much talent. And that's if he doesn't get into trouble between now and then. He seems to have some demons in him. And
finally, the zillion-dollar question for you, and I know David will shake his head when I go ahead and mention this one. How on earth do you get 227,000 Instagram followers? I don't even have 255.
I think the biggest thing as far as the growth was of course, the success helped a lot. But I think it was mixing in with the social influencing. I was able to do some awesome stuff with some very big people on there. People like Jake Paul, Logan Paul, Shannon Briggs. I was able to do some awesome things, some awesome skits, and really mix it up, do funny content, do my sports picking content, and make content that people enjoy to see. And I intend to grow a lot more in the next year. I'm going to pick more wins. And I think I'm going to have a very successful season next year picking.
So how much of an influence has your dad been to your picking career? And I know that my dad got me into sports, so I got to imagine your dad has been a huge part of what you've done, for sure.
Oh, yeah, he's been a huge part. Growing up, we watched every Cowboys game together, and, of course, the boxing. As I mentioned in the last podcast, he managed Shannon Briggs, Jameel McCline, Corey Spinks. Growing up, he did a fight with Michael Moore, former heavyweight champion of the world, and definitely got me involved with the boxing. We used to watch the UFC together. But later on, it turned into my passion, my biggest thing in life. And my dad works a lot, so he doesn't have too much time to catch everything like I do. But he still loves sports, and I have a great time watching sports with him and talking sports with him. Yeah,
I wouldn't even be able to come up with an over-under how many photos you have with all these people that you come in contact. I don't think I can count that. I don't think David can either. So, all right, but just so you know, everybody, you're listening to the Sports Exchange on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. My name is Scott Morgan, the Motor City Madmouth, along with David Levin and our sports handicapper Zach Hirsch. Has been a great show so far. So, all right, Zach, with that said, why don't you let everybody know how they can go ahead and contact you?
You can find me at iPickWins.com, www.iPickWins.com. You can find me on Instagram at iPickWins.
David, go ahead. You're next.
Hey, I'm on Fanshearted.com. I cover the Jacksonville Jaguars at Black and Teal. I cover the Miami Marlins at Marlin Maniac. I can be reached on Twitter at DM719907.
Okay, and last but not least, myself, okay? I have two Twitter pages. My personal one is Scoop, SCOOP, with 5 threes, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Do I need to count to 5? No. Scoop 5 threes gets it done. An easier one for you to go ahead and follow is at Tribune South, or that page is definitely growing as well. My name's Scott Morganroth, also is on LinkedIn, and we also have Facebook. You can like us on Facebook and follow us there, and of course Instagram as well. Obviously, our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. All of our broadcasts will be under the podcast section. And I want to go ahead and list all the 7 shows. Obviously, you're listening to the Sports Exchange. There's a South Florida Tribune podcast where we talk about non-sports related topics. David Levin and I are also involved in 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, and we're looking to do an awful lot with that. Motor Mouth and Wild Bill Winters, along with Rick Curdy apart. We have Motorman and Rude Dog, Fantasy Football with myself and Ryan Skolrud, and Xavier McKnight, the Real and the Rare. So we have a lot of variety. We have our affiliates columns as well as our regular contributors writing. So you can find us a lot of different ways, and we want to make sure that, we have Reuters on there for national sports and news. So, guys, it's been a really fun show tonight with you guys. And, Zach, you cease to amaze me every time we bring on the broadcast. So any closing thoughts, Zach?
I'm amazed.
NFL draft season is my favorite time of the year. I'm super excited for next week. See how this virtual draft's going to go.
Yeah, and one thing I should point out to everybody is I hope we've done a good enough job here to provide you with good entertainment. Our goal is to make sure that our entertainment's good enough so that it'll take your mind off of the daily concerns that you have. Also, I'd like to point out to everybody is please stay home, be safe, wear masks, gloves, and do everything that you possibly can do to stay safe. Also, I should shout out a kudos to the first responders who risk their lives every day, because I'll tell you what, without them, things would be a whole lot worse. So on behalf of, once again, David Levin and Zach Hirsch, this is Scott Morganroth of Motor City Madmouth, wishing you a good evening, everybody, and we'll be back for another edition of the Sports Exchange next week. Have a good night, everybody.